Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Batra daf Kaf. Today's daf is sponsored by Viti Rosenzweig Konis in loving memory of Sarah Rosenzweig, Viti, and David Greenbaum. Today's learning is sponsored by the Hadran Zoom family in honor of so many great joyful events in our Hadran family. Mazel tov to our friend and fellow learner Ruth Leah Kahan on the marriage of her son Ariel Kahan to Miriam Holmes. May their home be a source of peace and love for Am Yisrael. And a huge welcome home to our friends and fellow learners Gita Neufeld and Terry Kerbosha, and wishes for an easy yeshuv into your permanent home in Israel. Your moves an inspiration of hope to all of us. Zal tov to each of you and your families. Okay, one other announcement on July. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to be going away as usual in the summer. So at the end of July, starting on the 26th, there won't be Zoom until August 28th. So for that month, there won't be daily Zoom. The shiurim will go up early. As I mentioned in previous classes, the dedications for those days will most likely be only in writing. You have dedications and they won't be announced because most of the shiurim I've already recorded in advance, working on finishing them up. And the other thing that's nice to announce is that if anyone is in the Chicago area, I will be speaking there on July 31st in the evening at 7 p.m. So if anybody's there, you can let us know and we'll hook you up with the registration for the Shiur. You can write to us at info@hadran.org.il and we will send you to where to register for the Shiur. It will be at 7 p.m. in Skokie on July 31st. So if you have friends around there and you want to tell people about it, you can let us know and I'll give you the flyer to share around. I'm not sharing it to everybody in Hadran because it's not relevant to most people, but if it's relevant to you, so please let us know and we'll get the word out. Okay. Starting on daf bottom of Yud Tet Amud Bet. Where are we? We are in the middle of a sugya that kind of came out of nowhere. You'll see today there's two connections, small connections to our sugya. But Shmuel is quoted as saying that a rakik does not make the size of the window smaller to basically block impurity of a dead body from going through the window to the nearby house. So that means basically, let's just review. If there's a dead body in a house, everything in the house becomes impure. If there's a window, it's a tefach al tefach that leads between that house and the next door house, then the impurity will go through that window. If it's less than a tefach al tefach, or the window is a tefach al tefach, but there's something blocking some of the window, that is quote unquote permanent, because we'll see it's not fully permanent, but mostly permanent for now. Then we're going to say that that's going to block it. So comes Shmuel and he says, which seems pretty reasonable, a rakik, a wafer that's in that window is not going to block impurity from going, the impurity from going, because people are going to take out that rakik. It's incredibly impermanent. That's what we got to so far. We brought a braita, which seemed to say if you have this kupa or chavit, you have a barrel full of figs, or you have a box full of hay. It all depends whether we're judging it by the box, barrel, or by the hay. If we're judging by the barrel or the box, then it's a problem, okay? Then it's not going to block the impurity, okay? But if it's if the teven, the hay, or the figs can stand on their own, then we view it as if they're not in a box. Okay, now the box, what's the issue? A box is a vessel, and a vessel carries impurity. Okay, it's one thing I forgot to review today, which is if it's something that carries impurity that blocks the window, well, since it carries impurity, it's going to become impure from the dead body, and it's going to pass on that impurity through the window. It certainly doesn't block the window from passing impurity. So if it's the box or the barrel, well, that obviously has impurity. If it's the inside, if you could view it as if it could stand on its own, even though it's not, we view it by that, and then that is basically going to be considered a block, to which they then ask, well, why is that any different from the rakik? These are things that have use. People, if they have use, people will take them out, just like the rakik people will eat. To which they say, well, it must be talking about cases where they're not usable. Okay, they're rotten, they're worm infested. Okay, that was where we ended. Now we're going to have a bit of a problem. We assumed it's obvious that that barrel will become impure from the dead body, and then it'll be passed on through the window. And that was what we said about the chavit. But the Gemara is going to ask a question with that. Now, there's unique halachot for impurity of vessels depending on what the vessel is made out of. If the vessel is metal, anything touches the outside or the inside of the vessel, it will become impure. But an earthenware vessel has a unique way of becoming impure. It's only through the airspace, through the inside. If something touches the outside of the vessel, it doesn't make it impure. And that's going to lead the Gemara to their first question of today. Hi, Chabit Hechidamya. What is the case? Because again, we assume the vessel is going to carry impurity, right? And that's the whole reason why, if the vessel is in there, of course, it's not going to block the impurity from going through. But now the vessel could be in a way that we're going to assume the vessel is on its side, and either the opening is on the inside, to the house where the dead body is, or the opening is outside, and basically you end up with the bottom of the vessel in the house where the dead body is, or facing it. So either puma lavar, if the opening is outside, then he gufa techotz, then of course the vessel should block the impurity. And we said it doesn't block because it carries impurity. But a kli cheres, daha kli cheres, eno metamei migabo. If something touches the outside of a kli cheres, that doesn't make anything impure. It doesn't become impure in that way. So basically, it can't be that case. Ela de puma legayo. You would have to say that the mouth, the opening, was toward the house inside, toward the house where the impurity was. Otherwise, this wouldn't be the case. So what they're basically stressing to you is there's two different ways this could go, and it's not necessarily that the chavit is going to be blocking. Because if there's no opening of the barrel that's in the house of the dead body, then it actually the impurity won't pass. Or perhaps instead of saying that, you could say maybe the opening was to the outside. But then you would just have to say, and who said it was an earthenware vessel? It could be a barrel made of metal. Okay. Usually you think of a barrel not necessarily made of metal, but it was a barrel made of metal. And then what did we say about metal? Metal becomes impure either way, right? Whether it touches the outside or the inside, and therefore it would be impure. That was a very side point. Now we're going to get to the bulk of today's stuff, which is all this one Tosefta from Ohalot. The same way we brought a difficulty from a Mishnah in Ohalot, we're now going to bring a difficulty on Shmuel. Same kind of difficulty, exact same question, just with different sources and kind of weird out there ideas here, or at least the way we're going to have to explain them is going to be a bit odd. But we're basically going to bring a Tosefta that says that all these items that theoretically you would think are going to come in and out of the window and are not permanent there, and yet we're going to say that they're going to block impurity from going through. In other words, we're going to say, Shmuel, you said this rakik, which is going to probably come out because someone's going to want to eat it, doesn't block impurity because it's going to come out. That's your rule. That's your litmus test, right? If it will come out, okay, it won't block impurity. But this Tosefta says the exact opposite of you, because it's going to list a lot of items that theoretically you would think are not staying permanently in the window, and yet they're going to block impurity from passing through. And it seems like a total contradiction to Shmuel. Now, you're going to see the answers and the responses of the Gemara, how they're going to explain each one. And two of them are going to end up connecting with our sugya, and that's why we're here. Two of the answers. But they're going to be very out there answers. And one could just simply say the simple reading of the Mishnah is not like Shmuel. The Tosefta, is not like Shmuel. And possibly the Mishnah, because the Mishnah Ohalot also didn't really sound like Shmuel. And Shmuel just has some unique opinion that is very difficult to explain according to the Mishnah. So all these explanations, I just want to remind you, are only the way Shmuel has to read the Mishnah. If you don't hold by Shmuel, then you hold that even if it's not permanent, it could still block impurity. Because right now, it's making that window smaller, which actually seems reasonable, right? Shmuel doesn't think that. Shmuel thinks it's not going to block a window unless it's permanently in the window. But one could say otherwise, which sounds like the simple reading of the Tosefta. But we're going to read the Tosefta not in the simple reading because we want to explain the Tosefta according to Shmuel. So Meitive. The Tosefta starts like this. Asavin shet lashan v'nicham b'chalon. We're not going to explain yet all these things very well until we get to. We're going to go one by one in the Gemara, and the Gemara is going to go through each one. So we'll give a basic explanation, and then we'll understand it better as we go along, as to why this Tosefta thinks that these things actually block. So we now have grass that we uprooted from the ground and we put in the window. Or they were growing from the ground right next to the wall, grew up and went into the windowsill. Okay, so we have these items that go into the window. The window, again, is 1 by 1 tefach. As soon as it's filled with these items, we're going to see the Tosefta rules, they block the window. Umatlaniot, she'en bahem shalosh al shalosh, little handkerchiefs or little pieces of material, I shouldn't even call them a handkerchief, they're teeny. They're less than 3 by 3 fingers, okay? 3 by fingers, we mean the width of of 3 fingers of mine, okay? So if they don't have 3 by 3 fingers, then this is what we call not ra'oi lekabel tum'ah. It's not usable for anything real that would make it susceptible to impurity. In order for something to be susceptible to impurity, it needs to have significance. This is not significant enough. That's the size for a piece of, cloth. So a cloth that's not 3 by 3, that's in the window, is going to block the window. Because again, once it's 3 by 3, it could become impure. Once it becomes impure, remember, it'll become impure from the dead body. And of course, then it won't block impurity from going through. Of course, the impurity will go through. But once it's less than that, that will block the impurity. Now we get to the strange cases. We have a limb or some skin or some flesh, of the animal that's a little detached from the animal and hanging over the wall. So the animal, I guess, is on the ground, and part of the animal, let's say its arm is like hanging on the window. Okay, so that also blocks impurity. That's a bit weird. I mean, of course, that's going to move, right? It's attached to the animal. Or a bird that's sitting on the windowsill. A Gentile that's sitting in the window. Why a Gentile? Because a Jew becomes impure. A Gentile, by Torah law, doesn't have impurity from dead bodies. They don't become impure. Okay, Mida Rabbanit, they were gozer, that all were like zav. But for this purpose, since we're talking about Chuma v'mei going through, we're trying on a Torah level, so since they don't carry impurity, so they're not Mekabel Tuma, and right now they're blocking the window. Ben Shmona hamunach bechalon. Now, a person carries impurity, but a Ben Shmona, this is a weird case, and we've talked about this before in the Gemara, which is their understanding. It's not true nowadays, obviously, but their belief, or maybe it was true then, I don't know. I can't tell you what really happened, but their assumption was 7-month babies could be a premature baby that could survive. 9-month babies are regular term, full-term babies that survive, but a baby born after 8 months is not going to survive. That was an assumption they made, and therefore a baby like that is basically, we assume it's going to die within the first 30 days, and therefore it's not considered like a live human being that would carry impurity. So if you had a baby that was born in the 8th month in the windowsill, that would block the impurity. V'hamelach u'klei cheres u'sefer Torah. The last 3: salt, an earthenware vessel, or a sefer Torah. It's in the window, blocks impurity. Kulam mima'atim b'chalon. Here we get the ruling. Even though I told it to you already, all of these make the window smaller. So now we're going to get to a big question about what's going on. Yes, the animal and the limb is alive. Okay, any questions you have, we're going to go through them as we get there. But there's still more of the Tosefta. Aval hasheleg v'habarad v'haglid v'hakfol. Okay, if you have snow, hail, ice, or frost, or hamayim, or just water, kulam emimati b'chalon. Okay, those are all going to melt, or the water is not considered significant. It doesn't block the window at all. Okay, now we're going to start with our big list. We're going to go one by one and say, wait a minute. All these things are going to come out of the window. Okay, ha'asavim chazu lebehem tov. What are you going to do with it? You're going to take it out and feed your animal the grass. Totally usable. Well, ba'afrazta, Rashi explains it. It's a poisonous type of grass that basically, if you feed it to your animals will die, and that's what we're talking about. Only if it's poisonous will it not be able to. Okay, you can already see we're getting a bit extreme here. Instead of just grass, we now say poisonous grass. Okay, how much grass is poisonous? I'm not sure. Okay, next. Now here comes the first connection to our sugya. If you have grass that's growing near, right, there, we're assuming, okay, there's a window. That means there's a wall. The wall has a window in it. The grass is growing next to the wall, and that's how it got into the window, because it grew up and went through the window. If that's the case, of course, you're going to uproot that grass because it's going to destroy your window. Remember, we said anything planted within 3 would destroy your wall. Anything within 3 tvachim of a wall will, right? Remember, you plant something, the ground is going to have holes. It's going to cause some movement under the ground. It's going to shake the foundations of the wall, and it's not good for the wall. So of course you're going to take that out of the ground. So why would we say it blocks the window? Again, this is all according to Shmuel. According to Shmuel, who said anything you're going to take out of the window, which here you're going to definitely cut the grass, uproot it from the ground. So why would it do that? I'm a rabba, bekotel horba. The first answer is it must be a wall that you don't really care about. It's a wall of an abandoned, or an old house. Okay, and then there was dead body in the house, and there's a next door house, space. And the whole question is, does it go through this wall? But it's a wall you don't really care about. Or Rav Papa Amar afil bekotel yishuv, even if it really is a regular wall. Biba'in chutz l'shlosha lechalom. You could say, wait a minute. The grass could be coming from being planted with farther than 3 away from the wall and still could grow and go into your window. So he comes up with a case where it's not growing right next to your wall, but it does come through your window. That's definitely possible. Mataloniot. So now, well, this isn't makabel tuma because it's not usable, but actually it can be used as a patch. If you have a tear in your clothing, you can use it as a patch. And because of that, you're probably going to take it out of the windowsill. So again, it's usable for something. Bismichta, it must be thick material that's not good enough, that's not relevant to use as a patch. If you remember those patches when we were kids, they used to have these patches. I haven't seen anything like that nowadays. I think people just buy new clothes. But it used to be common. People would put patches, like your jeans were ripped. Now people wear ripped jeans. But in those days, you would actually patch it up when your jeans ripped. Now you buy them with tears in them. But anyway, so those patches are always thin. You're not going to put a big, thick piece of material. Chazul umana. Well, the bloodletters, which we're going to have 2 sugyas about bloodletters today, 2 issues. Bloodletters would use a thick material to basically clean the blood off the patient. So they say beriska. Now, maybe it's talking about a thick material that's like a sack, which is, right, think about those sacks of potatoes. They're very, rough, and they'll scratch the person. If you use that, it's abrasive. That's the word I was thinking of, abrasive. And it'll basically scratch the skin of the person that you're using it on. So they say, Iberisaka, Shemen, Shalosh, Shalosh. Wait a minute. If you're talking about sackcloth material, well, then the measurement for that is not 3 by 3. In terms of impurity, the size for impurity is different depending on what the material is, because a material of sackcloth is really not usable at 3 by 3. A small piece of cloth is usable at 3 by 3. You can use it. It's, there's all kinds of uses they come up with it, why you would use it. But a sack, you wouldn't use it unless it's 4 by 4. So, if it was talking about sackcloth, then it would say 4 by 4, not 3 by 3. So you can't say it's sackcloth. You're coming up with an answer to resolve Shmuel, but you're raising another problem with this Tosefta, which is the measurement of 4 by 4 doesn't match. To which they answer, and they're going to have a similar type thing later on with another one, ke'ein risaka. We mean it's a thick, abrasive material that's similar to a sackcloth, but not sackcloth, and therefore it would still have the measurement of 3 by 3. But okay, it's hard to really explain it that way, because once it's thick and abrasive, then it's not really usable for 3 by 3. But anyway, that's their answer, and they come up with some explanation. Okay, now we get to the more strange ones. So we have an animal that's standing next to the wall. There's a part of the animal, let's say the front leg is hanging on the window. Okay, let's just say it like that. And then we're going to say that blocks the window. That's very strange. Our kava'aza, the animal's going to get up and run, right? Okay, this reminds us of our sugya with the sukkah and the elephant functioning as a wall of a sukkah, right? We also had them functioning as a wall for other things. So bikshua. Okay, and that's what we always end up answering. The animal must be tied. Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about, because for sure then the animal will move otherwise. Okay, who tied the animal? Why they tied an animal? Good question, right? We're going to get to tsar balei chayim, okay, about pain to animals. Don't worry, but this somehow isn't considered under that category. Shachitla, but you might slaughter the animal. In other words, the animal might be tied, but you can untie so the animal won't be able to get out on their own. But you will likely untie the animal so you can slaughter the animal, because that's what animals are used for eating. Well, bitme'ah, we must be talking about a non-kosher animal. Okay, still mizabin le'lenochri, you can still sell it to a Gentile. Bikhusha, it's too lean, the meat, there's almost nothing on it. Okay, we're talking about an animal now, it would have to be tied up, not kosher, and very lean, but there's almost no meat on it, it's not worth it. Hasik shadele leklavim. Okay, but what about this limb that's on the window? Theoretically, you can cut that limb and give it to a dog, right? Dogs eat bones, right? So you could cut the limb, give it to a dog, and then obviously it will move. So again, we have a use for it, to which the Gemara answers, since we're talking about a live animal, to cut off a limb of a live animal to give to a dog to eat, that's inflicting unnecessary pain on this animal, and therefore you won't do it. Okay, and therefore we're not worried you're going to do something that's against the law and inhumane to animals. So again, a bird in the window. Okay, we all know birds fly. It's definitely going to fly off. It's not going to last there very long. Bikashur, again, we're going to assume the bird was tied down. Shachitle, but still, even if it's tied same as before, you might slaughter the bird. Well, bitame, it must be a non-kosher bird. Mizavin le'lenochri, still you could sell it to a Gentile. Biklanita. It's talking about a klanita bird, which is a type of bird that's too thin, there's not enough meat on it, nobody eats the bird. Yav le'liyanuka, well, you could give it to a kid to play with, right? Like kids have parrots and things like that. It would be a fun bird. Well, b'misaret, it's a bird that scratches. So your kid's not going to want to play with a bird that scratches. To which the Gemara says, wait a minute. You're answering answers that are totally contradictory. Just like we had before with the matlit, once you said it was made of sackcloth and it doesn't fit in with the other part, this also, if it's misaret, kalanita lo masarta. First you said it was a kalanita. Now a kalanita bird is a nice bird. It's not a scratching kind of bird. So you can't say in the same breath, it's a kalanita that scratches. Those two things don't go together. To which the answer, just like they did with the sackcloth, ke'en kalanita. We're saying a kalanita is just an example of a bird that is used, that is too thin, okay? So we'd have to find a bird that's too thin that also could scratch, and that's why we're going to leave this bird in the window, because it really has no use, not as food and not for kids to play with. Now we're moving to the ovei kochavim. Ovei kochavim she'ashav b'chalon, kai va'azu. Okay, the ovei kochavim is going to get up out that window. They're not going to stay in the window forever. Bekafut, again, we're talking about someone who's tied. Okay, they can't get out themselves, right? I'm thinking of a game of tag, right? How do you get out of tag? If you get caught, so somebody lets you out, somebody tags you back, and then you can get out. So someone will let them out. Bimitzora, well, maybe it's a leper. Okay, we're really getting extreme here in our answers. It's a leper, and nobody wants to go near a leper. What do you mean? There's other lepers who have no problem going near other lepers, so maybe a leper friend will untie the Gentile. And now we get to what on earth this Gentile is doing tied there. It's not like a Jew tied him up. Could be the Gentile was tied up based on a king's decree, in which case, even if there were another leper there to untie, or now you don't even need the answer of it being a leper, no one's going to untie this Gentile because they'll get killed by the king if they untie the Gentile that the king said needs to be tied up. And that's why the Gentile will stay in the windowsill. Again, we're getting a bit creative and a bit extreme answers here. Now we're getting to the real one that's the hardest one to swallow, which is this ben shmona. Again, it's very hard for us to understand, but they just assume this is a baby that's never going to survive, has zero chance of survival, zero. We're not talking maybe the baby will survive, zero chance of survival. Who's munach bechalon? Ati ime daryale, but maybe the mother will come and take the baby, right? Even though the baby's not going to survive, a mother's feelings with the baby, and the mother might want to nurse the baby, there's all sorts of reasons to pick the baby up. Well, bishabbat. And now we learned that permanent doesn't mean permanent. Permanent means temporarily permanent, which means on Shabbat, we're going to learn, and this is a very crazy halacha, a ben shmona, okay, again, this doesn't mean an 8-day-old baby. It means a baby born in the 8th month is muktzah. You cannot pick up the baby. Okay, so what do? Ditanya. Ben shmona haleyu ke'evan. Right? It says an 8-month baby is like a stone because it has no purpose. Right? Not that babies have purposes, but baby's a baby. You can move the baby. You can do what you want with the baby on Shabbat. They're not muktzah. But if it has no purpose because the baby is basically considered like dead, okay, because they're not going to survive, it's like an even, a stone, which is the highest level of muksa, which has no purpose whatsoever. And therefore you can't carry it on Shabbat. So what does the mother do? How does the mother nurse the baby? Well, we allow the woman to go near the baby, lean over the baby, kind of complicated, and nurse the baby like that. Why? Because of the sakana. What sakana? Not sakana for the baby, because the baby's going to die anyway. Sakana for the mother, because the mother gets, I forget the word now, so many years, but engorged, right? Is that what it's called? Where you have too much milk and you have to let it out. So because of that, and because she could get an infection, yeah, it is engorged. Thank you. So because of that, you have to allow the mother, otherwise she could get an infection or something, or it's just simply uncomfortable. Okay, now we're moving to the next one. So we've dealt with all the crazy examples. Now we're up to salt. And here's going to be our second connection. The first connection to our sugya was the grass growing right next to the wall, which we eliminated because we said perhaps it was growing distance from the wall. Melach, we also have salt, which ruins the wall. So first they're going to ask about salt. What do you mean? You could take the salt, again, you have salt sitting on the windowsill. We're going to take it and use it. So we're talking about very bitter salt. It's not edible. You can use it to tan the leather hides. It has thorns in it, and because there's thorns mixed in with it, so you won't use that. But wait, this goes back to our sugya. Salt will either erode away the wall, or you maybe create heat, something. It's not good for the wall. So you're going to move it so as not to destroy your wall. Well, it's sitting on a shard. So we have a little shard. It's sitting on top of the shard, and therefore it's distanced from the wall. It's not going to erode away the wall at all. And that's why you're not going to move it. To which the Gemara then says, why don't we say then the shard is making the window smaller? Because the shard itself, right, it's just a piece of earthenware vessel, but it's a broken one. So it doesn't have impurity. It doesn't accept impurity, but it will block this wall, to which we move now to Amabet, delay Bashiura. You say, well, it doesn't have enough of an amount to block the window, okay, which could mean, let's say that the window was a little more than a tefach al tefach. This shard didn't cut it didn't make much of a difference. It was a little shard. It wasn't big enough to make the tefach al tefach any smaller. So it's still, if it was a little more than a tefach al tefach, maybe now it's exactly a tefach al tefach, right? Again, 1 handbreadth by 1 handbreadth. But, right, if it were a big shard, or if the window was exactly a tefach by tefach, and this little shard got in the way, then it would. This must be a case. The salt is on a shard. The salt together with the shard would be enough to block, but since the salt is considered permanent there, right, so the salt is going to block the impurity and make it smaller, but not the shard. Okay, so now they say kiditnan. Now it's a little unclear why they bring this Mishnah. The commentaries all raise questions here, because this is a totally different. It's just talking about how shards could be very small. Okay, seems to be saying that. It's unclear exactly why they're bringing this, but this is an issue in Hilchot Shabbat. In Hilchot Shabbat, where we're talking about carrying, if you're going to be obligated, you're not allowed to take something from one domain to another, right? Or carry something 4 cubits in the public domain. But if you are going to be obligated for, let's say, taking something out of your house into the public domain, it's only if it has use. Like, let's say you have crumbs in your pocket. Crumbs are useless. So, right, little teeny crumbs, right? But you have a Cheerio in your pocket already. Someone could eat a Cheerio. Okay, so even though it's small, it could be eaten. So the question is, right, there's a whole discussion in Masechet Shabbat for a lot of things. What is the amount that makes this already forbidden to carry? So when it says cheres kedei litem bein patsim lechavero. Okay, so they're saying the earthenware shard, what's going to make it big enough? If you can use it in between beams or pillars or things like that. I was thinking sometimes you go, particularly to a restaurant, although it could happen in your own house, the floor is uneven, right? Often restaurants, if you're outside, the floor is uneven. And then they put something underneath the table to prop up one leg so that it all evens out. So something like that, where Rashi explains a little bit more complicated than that, but you put it, say, underneath something, and then you put some teat in between, you put some clay, or pitch, and then it all kind of comes together. But it's used for to even things out. Okay, that's the basic idea. If it's big enough to be used for something like that, then it already has significance. So what they're getting at here is that there's some cheres that are very small, maybe, and maybe like this, it's very small, but, it doesn't have enough. It's so small, it could be used to put the salt on top, but it's so small that it's not going to close up your window or be considered right to limit the space. Okay, now we get to the last few cases, the klei cheres. We had the salt, klei cheres, and the Sefer Torah. So now we're up to the second to last. An earthenware vessel. This is not a shard. This is an actual vessel. Chazile. What do you mean? You're going to take out that earthenware vessel and use it. So if there's an earthenware vessel in the window, okay, you're going to take that out. So why do we say that it's going to block? Well, dimitanif. It's disgusting. Okay, could have had. Remember we talked about when you have these earthenware vessels they would use for candles, so they would put oil in them, and then once you use them, they became disgusting. So, perhaps it's disgusting and you wouldn't want to use it. Now we go back to the bloodletter. The bloodletter sometimes uses these disgusting, dirty utensils to catch the blood in them. They would take the blood out of people, so they would put the blood into there. So diminakiv, you would have to say it has holes in it, and therefore the blood's going to drip through. It's not very usable. Sefer Torah. Okay, Sefer Torah, this is weird. I mean, of course, you're going to take out a Sefer Torah. Chazel Mikra, you can use it for reading. Bibaloi, well, it's worn out. Bahabai Geniza, well, then it needs to go into Geniza, right? Which we usually assume means burying in the ground. Well, Sham Tehe Genizatan. This is an interesting thing. You have to look this up, lahalacha, how this works. But apparently, by leaving it in the window, that can be considered a Geniza of the Torah. It's like designating a place for it where it's going to stay there. So there you ended all our questions. Again, we went through every single item in this Tosefta, which each one seemed to go against this halacha of Shmuel, that the rakik, basically, if you take out the rakik, because you're going to take out the rakik, it therefore is not considered a block for the impurity, and therefore impurity goes through the window, and yet all these items, which really seem like things you're going to take out, according to the Tosefta, are going to block impurity. Why is that? Each time we had to give a different explanation. And again, the connection to our sugya were both the grass growing near the wall connected and the salt on the wall which connected, which both those we came up with solutions. One, that it was planted with 3 tefachim away from the wall and just kind of draped over into the window. And the second, we said the salt was on an earthenware shard, so it wasn't wearing away the wall at all. Okay, moving on. Not yet, though, fully, because now we're just talking about salt, since we're on the topic of salt. And salt, can you use salt to form a wall, a mechitza? Okay, where mechitza is relevant in a bunch of different halachot, most particularly well, first of all, in sukkah, for example, or in eruv. So Amarav, bakol osim mechitza chutz mimelach u'ravav. You can make a wall out of anything other than salt and fat. Okay, fat, you can imagine it'll kind of melt. And salt doesn't really stand. Now, the problem is what kind of salt, and there's different kinds of salt. We get to this. Shmuel amar filu melach. Shmuel said, so Rav and Shmuel have a debate about whether salt can be used for a wall or not. So Amar Papa v'lo pli. Our Papa says there's really no machloket. They're each talking about different kinds of salts. Ha b'melach stomi. We know that Lot's wife, according to the tradition, was turned into a pillar of salt. That clearly was standing. And if you've ever been to the Stone area, you see formations of salt that have stood for generations. So you can imagine why the melach stomit could be, right? The melach from the Stone area could be used as a wall. And haba melach istrokanit, which is different kind of salt. We're going to see it's not like table salt. Okay, it's big particles of salt, but not as solid that they don't solidify like the sodomite salt. However, that's our Papa's resolution, where he basically says there's really no machloket here. They're just each talking about a different kind of salt. But now they say, Hashad Amar Rabba. Now that we heard that Rabba said the following, when it comes to an eruv, what do you need? You need what's called a tzurat petach. You need something that looks like an opening, and we have 2 pillars with a beam going across. So Rabba said, Osadam shnei tziburei melach u'minech alehem korah. You can make 2 pillars of salt with a beam going across them, a beam not made out of salt, sitting on top of them. Shahamelach ma'amedet et hakorah. The korah can basically stand on the salt. The salt can help, support it. And the korah ma'amedet et hamelach. What makes the salt stay in place? It has a beam on top of it. So the 2 work together. It's like one of these, physics kind of things. Before we're talking about chemistry, this is a little more physics, which is, right, the pressure of the beam on top of the salt keeps the salt in place. And the fact that these 2 beams are on the ground keep the beam in place. So we have this circular thing going on. So once we say that, and that's not melach stomi, because melach stomi can stand on its own. This must be the melach istrokani. So once you say that, you can say afilu melach istrokani, below pligi hadika koah hadaleka koah. If there's something heavy pushing down on it, kind of keeping it in place, then you could say even melach istrokani, and that's what the one who said that you can use it as a machitza, Shmuel, was talking about that. And Rab was talking without a beam on top. So that's a different way of explaining the contradiction, or the fact that there is no contradiction, right? I should say the debate wasn't a contradiction in the first place. We thought it was a debate. In the end, we could say it's not really a debate. Okay, now we're back to the end of our Mishnah. This will finish up this section. These were the two parts, the bottom part, the millstone, and the top part. The bottom part was wider, the top part was narrower, so it'll be 3 from the bottom part and 4 from the upper part. My time, mishum tiria. We assume it's because of the vibration. Okay, it makes movement, and the movement shakes the wall and weakens the wall. Tanya, but it says in a different source, in a Tanaitic source, v'shel chamor shlosha istrobil shein arba'a min hakelet. This is a different kind of millstone that the top part is moved around by a donkey. And the names of the parts are different. The istrobil is the bottom part. So it will be 3 from the bottom part and 4 from the top part, because that's the narrower part, the kelet. And there's no vibration. It works from the pressure. The donkey moves it around, and it has a different mechanism, and it doesn't have this shaking, vibrating thing going on. So, hata my tiria ika, there is no tiria. So what's the reason there? Elamishum kala, it's because of the noise, because it makes a loud noise, and the noise causes the weakening of the wall. So remember, we talked about this rim, and there's the belly of it. Unclear whether the rim is the bottom rim or the top rim. There's a debate, but either which way, the rim is narrower. So it's 3 from the belly and 4 from the rim. You can learn from here the kalya de tanor tefa. You learn from here that the belly of an oven is always one wider than the rim. What is this relevant for? Again, for business dealings. If you buy something and then it turns out that the belly of your oven is narrower than 1 tefach more than the rim, you can claim, hey, this isn't big enough. New Mishnah. Now we're getting to all sorts of other things. Back to our topic that one can't do to bother the neighbor. Now, in this case, we're going to be talking, and we're going to even quote, we actually saw some of this in Bava Metzia when we talked at the end about the bayit and the aliyah. There's a person living downstairs and a person living upstairs, and the person living downstairs has to ensure they're not causing damage to the person upstairs. So lo yamid adam tanur b'toch habayit elim ken yesh al gabav gova arba amot. You can't put an oven in your house. That's why often they did it in the courtyard, because you have to worry about the smoke going up to ruining the ceiling of the upstairs person, the floor of the upstairs person, which is your ceiling. So you have to distance it 4 cubits from the ceiling. If you're living upstairs, you have to build something 3 tvachim high off the ground to basically prevent it from ruining your floor, the floor, which is the ceiling of the person below you. Ubikira, if it's a kira, which has less heat than a tefach, only a tefach off the ground. V'im hizik, right, and you have to put plaster there. That's the ma'aziva. V'im hizik. Now, finally, we're getting to what if you damage. Until now, we keep just talking about preventing damage. Nobody really talks about what if it did damage. Well, if it damages, mishalei mashi hizik, okay? If you did this and you separated it, the 3 tefachim, the 1 tefach, whatever you were supposed to do, the 4 amot, and it damaged anyway, you still have to pay for damages. This is all just to prevent. But if it causes damage, it causes damage. However, Rabbi Shimon is going to disagree. Rabbi Shimon Omer, lo amru kol hashiurim ha'elu el Hashem yizik, patur milashalem. What do you mean? If you follow the rules the rabbis instituted and you distance it the way you were supposed to distance it, that was to protect you from being sued by your neighbor. Okay, so you say, I did everything I was supposed to do. I don't have to pay for damages. And that's a fascinating machloket about if I kept all these rules, right? Did I do everything I'm supposed to do? Or if I damage anyway, well, I'm still responsible. Okay, moving on though. Lo yiftach adam chanut shel nachtomim v'shel tzabaim tachat otzaro shel chavero v'lo refet bakar. If you have a storage house upstairs, okay, we're going to assume it's like grains or olive oil or wine. You have a storage house upstairs, and I have a bakery downstairs. I'm not allowed, or I'm a dyer where I'm cooking up the dye. So because of all the smoke, it's going to affect the stuff that you're storing, and I can't do that. And not a refet bakar either, because the odor the animals, the cattle, is gonna ruin your stuff. But be'emet b'yayin tiru. But the truth is, when it comes to wine, if you're storing wine, it's okay. The smoke is not going to bother the wine. In fact, they even say it's good for the wine, but the odor of the cattle is definitely going to ruin it. Now the Gemara asks, okay, that was the Mishnah. But there's a different brayta that says for an oven, it's 4. For a kira, 1 burner, it's 3. And ours says 3 tefachim and 1 tefach. And this says 4 and 3. So, Abai says there's a difference between a regular oven and an oven of a baker. An oven of a baker, it's going all day, or it creates more heat. So because of that, their oven, their kira is like our oven. So their 1 burner is more hot than our regular oven, and therefore their kira is 3 tefachim, our oven is 3 tefachim. Okay, lo yiftach chanut tana. So now we bring a brayta that expands on this. If I bred my cattle in my house and then you decide to turn the upstairs into a storage area, that's not my problem. I was there first. I get to do what I did. As a result of that, we have a slew of questions now. What if you came along, swept out the upstairs and got it ready to be an otsar, but it wasn't yet an otsar. You just cleaned it out to be a storage area. And then I come and put all my cattle in. Does that mean I did it before you? Okay, we're going to have all these kind of questions. What if you opened a lot of windows upstairs, which basically means open holes in your wall, because you wanted to have an airy space so that it wouldn't be moldy when you store your stuff. So again, you did preparatory work for an otsar, but you didn't actually use it yet. Some people think that the chalonot is the downstairs person. If I open windows to allow the smoke to go out the windows and then it wouldn't go as much up, that's a whole different story. And that reading works better with the next question, because the next question seems a bit different than all the rest. The simple reading of this is, we thought it was a house with a second floor. What if it was my house? Then there was a second floor, which was a portico, which means it was open on all sides. There were no walls. And then above that was your storage area. Would that be enough separation? And that's a little different, because the question seemed to be of the type of, what if I built mine before you, and what's considered before you? So some people say what this means, or the truth is this doesn't really relate to either which one. But it could be it's the downstairs for ventilation, and then it's similar at least to the chalonot. Then those two go together. Otherwise, this one's really different than all the rest. But if you say the downstairs area was just a portico where it was open on all sides, and then there's a lot of ventilation and the smoke goes out the sides, then is that okay? And then those two are a bit of a different type. If you say it's the chalonot and it's all preparation for the storage area, then the achsadra question is totally different than everything else here. Banal yal gabe beto mahu. What if, in your preparation for building a storage house, you own the second floor, and then you built this area right above the second floor, which is what a lot of people did often on the roof, that was clearly a storage area? Would that be considered already that you built it, and therefore, I can't put my bakar there? Teku. So we don't have answers to these questions. By Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua Tamre V'Rimonimai. What if you use this storage for dates and pomegranates, which really don't rot from these things, but maybe you'll later put the grains and the oil and the things that do rot? So we don't have an answer. Teku. Be'emet b'yayin itiru, tana b'yayin itiru mipnei shemashpicho. This is where we see it, that the yayin is actually good for it, the smoke. Below refet bakar mipnei shemasricho, but that causes a really bad odor, the refet bakar. And now comes Rav Yosef and says a very interesting line. Hi, I'm Rav Yosef. Hi, didan. Afilu kutra deshraga nami kashale. But nowadays, this mission is not relevant anymore, because the way we make wine, apparently he's saying, in Babylonia, even the smoke from a candle, which is a bit extreme, because what, no one's going to use a candle in their house, but even the smoke from a candle could damage, and therefore, it wouldn't be true that this isn't true for wine. Okay. Why it's different? So some people say just, they made wines differently in Babylonia. It was a whole different process, and therefore some explain that we're talking about even in Israel after the time of the temple, and there was some miracle in the temple, times of the temple, that it goes with those miraculous things during the time of the temple. The wines in Israel were, any smoke would actually make it better, and it was somewhat miraculous. And it was only in Israel and only in the time of the temple, whereas not relevant nowadays. Amar of Sheshet asfasta kerefet bakar damya. If you have asfasta downstairs, that's like a refet bakar that has a bad smell. That's the hay and stuff. It ends up with this bad odor that also can affect the neighbor. Okay, now we're going to do the next Mishnah. We'll end at the end of this next Mishnah. Very fascinating Mishnah and very relevant about zoning laws. If you live in a residential area, can you turn your house into a store? Okay, nowadays people do this all the time. Doctors' offices in their houses, Daf Yomi classes in their houses. Someone who did that happened to live in a small street, and it did create traffic in the morning. So all sorts of relevant things about what you're allowed to do and what your neighbor can prevent you from doing in your own house. So chanut shebechatzer yachol limchot biyado v'lomar lo eini yachol lisham mikol hanechnesim mikol hayotzim. If you share a courtyard with me, and I have a Daf Yomi Shiur going on in my house, and people coming all the time, or people coming to buy and sell things, maybe Daf Yomi class might be different, but are you allowed to say to me, listen, you have too many people coming in and out. It's bothering me. It's the noise. It's too much for me. You can do that. Aval osek kelim yotzei umocher b'toch hashuk ve'eno yachol limchot biyado. But if I create vessels in my house and I go and sell them in the shuk, you can't bother me about that, even though it makes noise, right? So eino yachol limchot biyado v'lomar lo. You can't complain and say the noise of the hammer banging, or the noise of your millstone is bothering me, or the noise of the children is bothering me. Okay, this sounds like it could be your children, or it could be children, and that's why I said maybe Daf Yomi is different, because children in a school might be different if they're learning from the rabbi. Perhaps that's different. So now the big question is going to be, and I'll leave this for tomorrow because we're really at the end here, but maybe we'll open with a few reasons, very different reasons among the commentaries for why we distinguish between a store and between, theoretically, it sounds like it's a much louder noise, a banging of a hammer. We all know how disturbing that is. But I can do that to create vessels in my house, which, by the way, is also work, right? I can do that, but I can't sell in my house. And what's the difference between that noise and that noise? You can start thinking about it already, and we'll bring some explanations tomorrow. So with that, we finished for today. So again, the whole first part of the daf we already reviewed. I'm going to leave that aside. Then we got from there, we got off tangent about salt in general, and the melech stomid and the itztrokni, basically this making mechitzas out of salt. Then we went back to the Mishnah, the rechaim and the tanur, and we just spoke minor things that we kind of took from there. And then we got to this big issue about two people living one above the other, what things you can't do downstairs that will affect the upstairs, what things you can't do upstairs that will affect the downstairs, and you have to be concerned that you don't cause damage to your neighbor, what does cause damage, what doesn't cause damage. And then we move to the Mishnah about the sound and what kind of sounds one can claim that's bothering me, you can't do that, and the other can't do, and what things you can't complain about. And very interesting topic that we'll get more into tomorrow. Wishing everyone a good day.